I hope you all can hear me. Today, we have Mr. Amardeep Singh Toor from Hishammuddin, and he's a partner. I'm going to just read a bit on his profile. Mr. Amardeep handles both litigation and advisory matters on all aspects of employment and industrial relations law. He also advised corporate clients on immigration laws and on management of the foreign workers and expatriates, as well as employment related tax laws in Malaysia. He has contributed several articles to the industrial law reports published by the Malaysian Current Law Journal, recognized as a rising star on the Legal 500 Asia Pacific 2020 ranking. Amardeep has been commended for his ability to present clients in a clear layman's way without over legal jargon. A graduate of the University of the West of England, Bristol, and a member of the Honourable Society of Lincoln's Inn, Amardeep was courted the Bar of England and Wales in 2012. He was admitted as an advocate and solicitor of the High Court of Malaya in 2013. So today he's going to talk about managing workplace misconduct issues for remote employees. So if anyone wants to have questions, you can put it in the chat box, and towards the end of the session, he will answer. So I'll leave it to Mr. Amardeep to speak.
Hi everyone. Good morning. Firstly, thanks very much, Amira, for that introduction. I see you have put no pressure on me by stating that I'm a good communicator. I hope that I'll live up to that. I also like to thank IR Law for having me today, and more importantly, you guys for waking up at let's say actually not really, it's 11 o'clock to listen at this. Right now, I think all of us are in an unprecedented time when we're all having to work from home in something that was not that we had planned. It was more that it was forced upon us. And I think a lot of companies, as we speak until today, still continue to implement this work from home culture. So today I'm assuming the target audience is mainly HR personnel. So I'm going to be explaining to you all, firstly, I will start off with what is misconduct for you all to truly understand how you all need to investigate misconduct matters. I will, just admit someone in. Okay, how do you investigate misconduct matters? Once we're done with that, I will try to highlight to you all a few examples of acts of misconduct that are common and that may occur when employees are working from home. Once we are done with that, I will then try to address a few possible ways of managing such risk of misconduct before concluding and taking your questions. Right, Amira, I think we are we good to start?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In regard to questions, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. If I do see them as I'm approaching a topic and I think they're relevant, I may even address your questions as I'm going through my slides. In regard to the slides, you can email me later. I will give you the details and I can send that to you all. Right? Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, the global pandemic has made working from home now more commonplace, right? Previously, we were very used to driving to work, paying the toll, having to go through 1 hour of traffic. But today, working from home has become a lot easier, has made working life so much easier. You wake up at 9 o'clock, you take your shower, you have your quick coffee, you're on your computer by 9:30, right? So that has actually encouraged a lot of employers to carry on with such work from home arrangements, right? There's obviously greater benefits. I also know some companies that have actually implemented work from home until June this year, right? So they have actually had a foresight and said that, you know what, we are not going to just implement it until the CMCO is lifted. We are going to go on for the next 6 months. I also know some companies that have actually approached us and they are looking to now terminate their lease. They are trying to actually downsize. They do not need so much office space. Previously, they were using 3 offices. Now they are saying that, you know what, we are a fintech company. We are meant to hot desk. We are going to bring it down to 2 offices, right? Now, While obviously there are many benefits of working from home, we also know there are a lot of issues and concerns that come with working from home. And today we're just going to zoom in on misconduct, and we're only going to address misconduct. We will not touch on items like poor performance, probationers, which can be a topic for another day. Now, I think before we address misconduct or how to handle misconduct or how to investigate misconduct, I think the most important thing we have to know is, first of all, do you all understand what misconduct is, right? And what do you need to do in order to satisfactorily win a case to the Industrial Court, right? So, as we all know, the Industrial Relations Act is the bane of every employer's life, right? This act pretty much Section 20 states that you cannot dismiss someone until you have just cause and excuse, right? Unlike jurisdictions like Singapore, where you can hire and fire at will, in Malaysia, you can't. Employees can resort to the Industrial Court, and well, now they have direct access to the Industrial Court and expect a lot more claims. So, what do you need to do to establish misconduct? How do you win a case premised on misconduct? You need to satisfy two questions before the Industrial Court. The first one is, of course, it's a question of fact. Can you prove that the misconduct was committed? The employee was, for example, the employee was late to work. That's a question of fact. You go to your HRMS system, you should be able to see from there or what time he had tagged in, right? So that's your question of fact. Now, the proven misconduct, does it warrant dismissal? That's your question of law. Now, not every case warrants dismissal. If I am late to work once, does it warrant dismissal? No, right? I'm a lawyer, it's okay. But now, if I'm late to work, and let's say I'm a lawyer who had a hearing on that day, and the case is dismissed, does that warrant dismissal? Yes, right? There's severe consequences. My clients probably will disengage the firm. I will probably be investigated for professional negligence, right? So yes, that warrants dismissal. So I've got two scenarios there for you all to just have a look and ponder upon, right? So you've got one employee who's been working in the bakery for just 5 years, both of them. One of them stole to meet production demands because he didn't have lunch and breakfast. Later that day, he felt dizzy. He stole and consumed a pastry. Question of fact, has he stolen a pastry? Yes, right? Question of law, does the act of misconduct warrant dismissal? Arguably, no, right? Because the company had overworked him. He was working for the betterment of the company. He was not feeling well. He skipped his lunch and his breakfast. He was not feeling well. Therefore, he stole and consumed a pastry, right? Now, the second question, he works in a tire shop, right? Last week, he stole tires to treat his friend at a day at the saloon. Question of fact, has the misconduct been established? Yes, very clearly, he stole. Question of law, does it warrant dismissal? Yes, he only stole because he wanted to treat a friend to a day at the saloon, right? Now, so having seen that, bearing in mind, what do you think the main concerns are when an employee works from home? For me, I think the most severe consequence, the top two would be confidentiality, confidentiality and cybersecurity, and time management, right? So I'll start off with confidentiality and cybersecurity. In every company, maintaining the confidence of your clients, right? Maintaining cybersecurity, ensuring there is no IT breach is paramount in every organization, right? On a yearly basis, we receive a lot of claims, right? A lot of cases where clients approach us simply because their confidential information has been leaked, simply because their confidential information is being used by a former employee to start off his own company, right? And how is this leaked? Various different ways. Some of these employees obtain this during their employment. Some of them also obtain this by simply downloading it off the company's intranet, right? So it goes without saying that leaking or disclosing confidential information will always be a serious act of misconduct. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because when you work from home, the possibility of unintended disclosure of confidential information increases. So I've got an example of a case that took place 7 years ago. In this case, the employee was the head of finance. He was the head of finance and he was working on a corporate transaction. It was a sale of business that he was working for. And he received a call. He received a call from a journalist, and the journalist asked him, is it true that that this company, I think the company was called Temco, is it true this company Temco is looking to sell its business? And what this employee did was, he didn't answer yes or no, but he said, you should know about this. You can read it from the article in the Age newspaper, right? And that article in the Age newspaper, if you read it, I mean, it only said that there is a possibility that Temco is looking to sell its business. The details of the sale was not there. It merely speculated that there was going to be a sale. So the court held this, that yes, there has been disclosure of confidential information. Yes, it's unintended. However, it's still serious enough to dismiss because the reference to that article itself confirmed the sale, right? So the court in this case confirmed that even when it is unintended disclosure of confidential information, it is still serious enough to warrant dismissal, right? Now, like I said earlier, work from home arrangements create a room for unintended leakage or disclosure of confidential information, right? It also gives rise to various different potential cybersecurity risks, right? I'll give you some examples, right? One of them, and this was something that one of our clients even approached us for, was where an employee had allowed one of her family members to use the laptop, right? And subsequently, an IT audit was conducted, and it was discovered that this family member had, for some reason, decided to download some documentation from the company's intranet, right? He didn't need it. It doesn't seem that he even used this confidential information, but he thought it was suitable for him to do so. And subsequently, an IT audit was conducted, and they found out that this employee has been using company's resources during company hours to do things like a kid's homework, for the husband to log in to do his work. So obviously the next question arose was, if someone was using your laptop to do their homework, if someone was using your laptop to do their work, then what were you doing? Obviously you were not doing work, right? So I've got an example of a case there, Muhammad Rosli. In this case, this is a recent case involving Perodua, if I'm not mistaken. What happened was the employee, he needed some assistance, so he called his friend and he said, a colleague, and he said, can you log in onto my system, and here's my password and my username. Subsequently, it was discovered that, unfortunately actually, that the very act that he told his colleague to do had caused some losses to the company, right? Obviously, he had instructed his subordinate to do it. The subordinate had logged in on his instructions. Subordinate carried out his lawful instructions. Subsequently, discovered that action had caused some losses. The court found that dismissal is with just cause and excuse, and said that your login details are confidential. You should never share it with anyone. The act of sharing it itself is an act of misconduct, right? Other examples is, for example, when you leave your laptop unattended. And this is a personal experience. I went for a holiday about somewhere in October. This was just few days before the second CMCO. And we were seated by the beach. I was having a drink. And on the computer on my left, on the table on my left, was this lady, her husband, and two friends. And they were on, one of them was on the iPad. And I could see that she was actually on a Microsoft Teams meeting. And I could get very soft. I could very softly hear that actually one of the colleagues were actually talking during that meeting. Subsequently, from my seat, I could even see that documents were being shared. Now, all those are confidential information. It could very well be confidential information. For example, maybe you're working in a pharmaceutical company and that is your price listing, right? That is confidential. You shouldn't be sharing, right? A list of your customers or customers that you're planning to see, right? All those are confidential information. So where you take your call becomes now very important. Now, that brings to the next point. Working from home, does it mean working from home, you work from home, or can you work from any premises? Because you would see now very common that In Starbucks, you'll see people sitting down there working for hours, taking calls. They will have documents on their table, might be confidential, might not be. By the same time, they are also using company resources on an unsecured Wi-Fi, assuming they're not using their hotspot, right? They could be very well using Starbucks Wi-Fi or something along those lines. Now, is that secure? It's another question. Now, there's also instances where employees do not use the VPN that the company has provided. Hence, you leave it vulnerable to cyber attacks. So with that, how do you manage this? Obviously, the very important thing that companies should do is come up with a policy. Amend your IT policy, relook your IT policy. You should ensure you take steps to ensure that your confidential information, deals or documents are not compromised by employees when they are working from home. I've also put an example there. Now, when you work from home, there's also an increased risk that employees may use their resources, for example, company laptop, company phone, for personal communication. Now, this may, again, land them into trouble if, for example, is picked up for an audit. In this case, Rachel Matthews, what happened was, this is about, I think this case took place 10 years ago. Now, in this case, what happened was the employee was actually still working with at that juncture. The employee was working, but she was communicating with colleagues about the managing director. So I think comments were passed about the managing director being very bossy. I think there was also a plan. Don't get ideas. There was also a plan to put something, they wanted to feed something to the managing director. And they all thought this was a good idea to have this communication using the company's laptop. Now, the court held that, in this case, that all those emails were actually just banter, right? It was all just for personal reading between two colleagues. It's just between, we all do that. Sometimes we go, oh, boss is being unreasonable with me, right? Oh man, I can't take this. Boss is being very irritating. The court felt that this is what it was. It was simply for personal reading. However, when they used it on company property during office hours, it became company property. And therefore, it became serious enough now to dismiss this employee. Now, so what do you, as employers, as HR practitioners, do to ensure that such risk is managed? Number one, obviously, have very clear policies. Documents, under any circumstances, in every circumstances, should be under lock and key. For example, if you're not using it, it should not be lying around on the table. If you live alone, maybe the risk is less. But if you do not live alone, and if your house is frequented by others, it should be stored maybe in a cabinet. It should be locked. Now, there should also be clear protocols for employees to follow in the event of a cyber attack. For example, if you are in Starbucks and suddenly you have been, you've got a virus, or you've got, for example, you have been hacked. What steps you must take? How quickly must you report this, right? What are the step-by-step details that you should be doing, or you should be contacting IT? How soon must you do it? They should all be detailed down. Now, these are some of the other steps that I've, from my experience, other employers have done. One of them was, very common, is every document sent while working from home was password encrypted. The main reason was because while your older employees might be staying with family, you would also have your younger employees who are actually working, who are also staying with employees, who are also staying with friends who are working in other companies. The risk of these documents being exposed is much higher. So have it password encrypted. For confidential information, to ensure there is no printing, no documents lying around. I also know companies who have encrypted it so that these documents are not printable. So in other words, you can review this document, you can key in the password, you can look at the document, however, you can never print it. So people must really go out of their way to take a photo of that document, to go and print it, to go and disclose this information. right? They must really go out of their way to actually want to disclose this information. Now, you must also relook your IT policy to ensure that it's in line with your current work from home arrangements. There are a lot of IT policies that we review are very much outdated, right? It doesn't give you your right to remote access, for example, your employees' laptops. You may also have now some other concerns. So, for example, as we know, your employees can always access your laptop. Now, while they are working from home, there may be increased risk of other things that could happen. I will touch on that a bit later. You should also ensure that you conduct more frequent audits, right? I know some companies that conduct audits on almost on a monthly basis, right? To ensure that, sorry, did I disconnect? Yeah, sorry. I also know some companies that conduct audits almost on a monthly basis, to ensure that the laptops are not used for personal basis, personal reasons. To ensure their laptops, there was no unauthorized disclosure of confidential information. Now, that brings me to my next area, which is second most common issue that we actually now as employment lawyers face, which is time management. A lot of employers actually do call us and tell us that, you know what, it starts off as something as this. We know the employee isn't working. We know the employee's productivity levels have dropped. What can we do, right? And what steps can we take, right? So some of the more common ones that we see is, of course, employees working at irregular, erratic hours. Don't go far, that also happens in our firm. Ever since March, we would get emails from at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., only because some employees now choose to wake up at 11, 12, especially the younger ones, 11, 12, and they like to work at night. You know, they're night birds. So they like to start working at 11, maybe 10 at night, and they will give you the document at 4 a.m. in the morning to review, right? Now, you can say that there should be no hard and fast rule that as long as your employee is working his 8 hours, as long as your employee is giving you what is required of him, the employee should not be so difficult on the employee. Now, that might be true, but there are some industries where this is not possible. For example, in the legal industry, we are a service industry. We service our clients. We are there when our clients need us. We should be there when our clients call us. Now, imagine calling your lawyer at 12 o'clock and you can't get hold of him, right? Because your lawyer is still sleeping. So, and you need something done urgently, or you need some sort of confirmation urgently. So this is why you must always remain contactable during working hours, right? So that brings me to the next point, remaining contactable during working hours. Now, again, if you work in a team and you're not contactable, that may again lead to unnecessary delay, which could, a job that could have been completed in 1-2 hours now is taking 8 hours only because one person is not pulling his weight. Now, and one of the more important points, I think, is it also may lead to dubious claims of overtime, right? Employees who are now doing work for 8 hours may very well just say, boss, sorry, it takes me 12 hours. I need 4 hours of overtime, right? Some other examples is, and this, I even know people from personal experience, engaging in secondary part-time employment during working hours, after working hours, without the knowledge of the employer. This mainly usually is gig workers. You will see a lot of people now doing Grab, a lot of people doing Food Panda. The other one I can think of is Lala Move. And a lot of these people actually have full-time employment, but yet they are somehow magically able to deliver your food at 4 p.m., right? Usual office hours are 9 to 5. Now, the other one is time theft. I'm sure HR practitioners would be able to tell us this, that a lot of your employees this year would have carried forward leave, number one. A lot of your employees would have been able to clear their leaves over the last 2 weeks of December. Now, looking at it in the previous year, 2019, were these employees able to clear this many leave? Were these employees able to carry forward this many days? Now, I'm not judging anyone, but obviously this indicates that this year, of all years, employees took the least amount of leave. Yes, I understand we were under lockdown, but we were still working, right? They were, and this especially in our industry, we were still working. We were still working. We were still expected to clock in our 9 to 5. We were still expected to carry out the objectives that we are supposed to. But yet we are able to have so many days of leave. So that's where it comes to the next point, that employees now don't take leave because they hold themselves as, you know what, I'm working from home, right? All I have to do is move my mouse and my employer will assume, my employees will assume that I'm online. Now, so what do you need to do? You need to, sorry, just give me a second. You need to take steps to ensure that these disciplinary concerns are effectively managed, right? How do you do so? You need to implement schemes to monitor timekeeping, especially for those employees who are entitled to overtime claims. Now, we also know that we have spoken to some of our clients and we asked them, how do you all manage such concerns? And some of them actually manage it with something as simple as having Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is, not just for work purposes, but also for quick catch-ups. So I know a friend who works in a telecommunications company, and every morning, or at least on Mondays and Fridays, they have got quick catch-ups. So they will sit down at 9 o'clock and have breakfast together, and they will ask each other, oh, what happened during your day today? On the other days, they have lunchtime together. So that keeps everyone engaged, right? People don't break away from this chain that, you know what, when I work from home, my office hours are reduced. I only have to do what my boss tells me to do, right? So that keeps people engaged. But again, the one concern you must have is when it comes to time management is employees must be mindful about respecting employees' personal time. So I was reading an article about how in India there was a case of harassment. And the case of harassment was the employer would call the employee at 11 p.m. about stuff that could be done through email, right? But you would call the employee at 11 p.m. and just ask, hey, have you sent this document out? Hey, have you done that? Things that could very well done by email, right? So you must be very careful and mindful to respect your employees' personal time. Because employees, again, should not be expected to be constantly on call. Now, if they are constantly on call, this could then raise the risk of overtime claims. Now, some other issues that I want to talk about is discrimination. I think discrimination, cyberbullying, harassment is starting to develop in Malaysia, but discrimination and cyberbullying is not something that we are very common of in Malaysia. Now, obviously, video conferencing platforms are giving opportunities to employees to peek into employees' personal lives, right? Now, HR practitioners, here's where your role comes in. You must ensure that the superiors are attentive enough to ensure that their comments are not discriminatory in nature. All right, I'll give you some examples. Just give me a second. Right now, consider a situation where a Zoom video call is happening and a baby is crying in the background, or where you see toys lying on the ground. Right now, you may actually expect a comment from a superior going, "I see that you have your hands full," or "We won't want to include you in the meeting later because we can see you are busy." Now, this is a matter that I'm currently even doing. We heard the superiors mention something along the lines that, let's not include, don't worry, this person won't be joining us in the meeting because he's probably busy taking care of his daughter. Now, all these comments are actually loaded and possibly discriminatory. Now, if they are, you open yourself up to a risk of constructive dismissal. All right. Obviously, a single comment may not be discriminatory, may not lead to a constructive dismissal claim, but however, the maker of it could very well be found guilty of misconduct. Now, what else do we assume that? This is just me digressing a bit, right? The other examples of discrimination that we can consider during times like that is discrimination against someone who has actually contracted COVID-19, or someone who has been a close contact. Again, this is something that I've spoken to some people who have personally, who have contracted the disease, or who close contacts, and they have told me the same thing, that when they went back to office, they felt that sense of discrimination, not just from their superiors, sometimes even from their colleagues. People would want to stay away from them. People would ask them, have you tested negative? How many times have you tested? When's the last time you tested? Things like that really encroach into their personal space. I've also known of someone who have been told that he should not enter into a meeting because his presence would make others feel uncomfortable. And the boss said, I hope you understand. It's not that I have anything against you. It's just that, the others, we're going to be in a boardroom. There are going to be 20 people there. And, if you're there, a lot of people will be very uncomfortable. I hope you understand. Now, and actually requested him to take a call from the office itself through Zoom, right? Now, again, the other one I want to talk about is cyberbullying. We expect, cyberbullying is, you would have different managers where they would hound their employees during day and night. Something that I gave you an example, the case in India, where the employee claimed that the employer would call her actually at 11 p.m. just for very basic things. You may also see employers sending overly critical emails. Now, it's different when you tell your employee that verbally you tell him something along the lines that, are you serious? Is this how you handle it? Is this how you're going to handle it? Now, when you say that in person, what happens? The message is decimated in a second. It's done after that. But what happens if the message is on paper, on record? The employee will read it over and over and over again, and this would lead to, unwanted feelings, right? Unwanted feeling of I'm being bullied, right? So be very careful with how you document your emails. Be very careful with what you say over emails. Obviously, employment is no place for you to vent your frustration, but do expect employees feeling more of that. Now, so how do you handle such discrimination and cyberbullying, and how do you manage and ensure that the risk of such is you can manage such risk, right? Now, the HR practitioners must do is to ensure that you constantly check on your employees and keep educating them, right? You must ensure that these employees, I think they have got, companies have got this thing called EAPs, Employees Assistance Programs. You must ensure that these employees at least engage with these EAPs on at least a monthly basis to stay in touch with them to understand whether there are any concerns of bullying or harassment or discrimination, right? There's also a need for HR to actually educate superiors, right? To educate employees on the new norms, on the different forms of discrimination and cyberbullying that could take place. Now, sexual harassment. Sexual harassment, everyone knows, I will not go into the Employment Act definition, but it simply means unwanted and unwelcome sexual conduct which leads to a hostile and intimidating work environment, right? That's the easiest definition of it. Now, obviously, one of the most common forms of sexual harassment is touching and misbehavior. That has obviously will reduce with everyone working from home, but that doesn't mean that sexual harassment will not take place, or that doesn't mean that sexual harassment cannot take place, because the thing about misbehavior is it can be done anyhow, right? It can be done verbally, it can be done physically, which is what usually happens in a work environment, can be done through gestures, it can be done through psychology, it can be done through visual, right? Now, all this through gestures, visual, I will take you all to an example of a case, right? It's not really a sexual harassment case, but in this case, what happened was the MD sent an email to his colleague stating that he's leaving his employment, right? And at the bottom of it, he posted a link to his new colleagues, and he says, "These are my new colleagues." Now, when everyone clicked that link, the MD thought this was funny. It's funny, it was because it came from the MD itself. The MD thought it was funny to click. When you click the link, it will take you to a picture of nude women riding bikes. He told his colleagues that he's moving to a bike company, and that was the link, right? Now, the employer took it as if the employee had truly resigned. And subsequently, the employee, the MD, brought a claim of forced resignation against the employer. The court held that yes, you won. The MD did win on the case of forced resignation because he did not resign, right? But the court still said this: I am going to make a deduction of 50% because you must be more diligent when you use your company's laptop. You're the MD. You should lead by example. Posting pictures such as this is clearly sexual harassment. It's clearly unintended, right? Now, I'll give you some other examples, and these are the one below is something that's new. I think it just happened 2 days ago or something along those lines. One of them, it's a writer for the New Yorker. What happened was he was suspended for unintentionally exposing his genitals to his co-workers during a Zoom call. He thought he was off camera. You can read about that, how that happened or whatever it is. But the second one is it's a bit funnier because it's a mayor in Belgium. And what happened was here he wasn't taking an employment call, but he was with a reporter. And the reporter asked him, he said, the reporter told him, you've got a very nice shirt. He said, yes. He said, I'm just curious why you in your underpants. And then he looked at the reporter and he says, how do you know that? And then he looks and he stops and he says, yes, I have a mirror behind me, don't I? Right? And that's the picture you can see. So now, all these are unintentional, right? But we also know people who would, I wouldn't say we know, but we also know of incidents where people have done this on purpose, right? So these are the other norms or other forms of sexual harassment that we can assume may happen, right? Now, with working from home, as we know, professional communication is becoming a bit more personal. I was giving you an example of a telecommunication company. Now, before this, the employer would never ask the employee, what did you do on a Sunday? What did you do on a Saturday? Oh, how was your weekend, right? But now that's becoming normal, and that should also be done because you need to keep everyone engaged. You're not able to have the day-to-day interaction, right? Now, you also see examples of superiors sharing memes, photos, using social media platforms like TikTok, just trying to stay engaged with everyone in the company. Now, obviously, when everyone loosen up or people loosen up in a work environment, you may again lead to inappropriate comments or jokes. Now, an employer under the Employment Act, even if you carry on working from home, if it happens in a working environment, for example, if the case of sexual harassment is by an employer, you still have your obligation to investigate promptly and take swift action. So you would need to carry on with your day-to-day obligations to handle harassment. Now, another incident that I want to very quickly, this is not really misconduct, but since we are here, I want to just talk about health and safety. So as we know, OSHA requires every employer to ensure the welfare of his employees at work. The regulations also state that you need to make a suitable and sufficient risk assessment of all work activities, right? Now, this is very straightforward. When your employee works in your company, it's very easy for you to make sure the cabinets are all mounted in, make sure no wires are left exposed. But it's different when your employees are working from home, right? Well, you could also say that would not be something that OSHA will be concerned about, especially if there's a wire, for example, exposed in the employee's house. That has nothing to do with work. But now, what happens if an employee is working, is taking a Zoom call, he suddenly needs to take his charger because he realizes his battery is low. He runs towards the charger without realizing that his child's toy was on the ground. He trips and he falls. Now, is that an employment injury? Right? It could be a scenario where it's an employment injury. So there could be concerns with SOCSO, right? What is classified as an occupational injury? Now, with that, you should also look at your insurance. You need to ensure that your existing insurance policy do cover for such work from home environments arrangement, and do not contravene any of these terms and conditions of these such policies. We know some of these policies require employers, for example, to report accidents within 24 hours, right? I also know of certain countries, for example, the UK, prior to the lockdown there, would allow their employees to work from home. However, they need to complete a checklist that their work environment is safe. Now, I will not go to the next one. So now, let's go to how do you manage misconduct for employees working from home? What are the steps that you can possibly take, right? First one, of course, is you need to take steps to foster interpersonal connectiveness and personal support, right? Now, this may be done through regular online meetings. This may be done through video conferencings for tea, for lunch. I also know companies that have done things like they would have a lunch meeting, but they will have, I think it was HSBC Bank, they would have this thing called e-comedy, right? So they will hire a stand-up comedian. Then during lunchtime, over Zoom call, you can watch for 45 minutes. Now, virtual communication also may not be effective for everyone. I myself find working from home very difficult. I myself find video calls very difficult. Until today, I still prefer to meet my clients. They unfortunately do not want to meet me. But you need to coach employees. You need to educate them on how they need to adapt to this new work environment. For example, if you've got a scenario where you're unable to solve a problem by emails, right? You may need to then set up a virtual meeting. You may need to make phone calls. Not everything can be done through emails, right? So coaching is the key there being coaching. Now, I think this is the most important, having a dedicated work from home policy and procedures that all employees must adhere to. And in this policy, you must touch on things like cybersecurity, time management, working hours, and safety, right? You need to also move away from conventional role definitions. You've got a lot of employees who are very fixated with, for example, defining what a role is or defining what your job functions are. You need to leave, this may leave employees unsure, especially in times like that. Like, for example, I've got my colleagues, like my secretaries, right? What their role definition is during before the lockdown and after the lockdown is very different, right? So we must focus now more on their objectives, right? Giving them an objectives to achieve during this period. And that would be something as simple as, I don't expect you to, I don't expect a 9 to 5. What I expect you is to produce this project within the next 2 weeks, something along those lines. Now, I think the next part is something that we have already addressed about education. I think it's very important to educate your employees, especially the superiors, on their boundaries, mannerism. We have a lot of superiors, like I told you, comments may be passed, something as simple as, do you have a room in your house? Is your house big enough for you to work from home? Comments like that may indicate some sort of discrimination, some sort of indirect bullying, right? Now, you need to do that. You must also not require, for example, must also ensure that you have your boundaries to only contact, or for example, working hours are strictly working hours. You should not be pushing your employees to after working hours, or asking them at 11 p.m. to do something, or calling them at 11 p.m. Next is something that we have spoken about also, is looking at your insurance and your practice liability insurance. Working remotely will definitely change your working conditions. Having changed your working conditions, you must ensure that your insurance policies actually do cover for such arrangements. The next one is intellectual property, confidential and personal information. You need to look at your IP agreements. You may need to relook and ensure that your IP agreements does cover a scenario when employee is working from home. Let me give you an example. If an employee is working from home, if the employee is working from the company's premises, he were to produce a product or produce something, you would be able to claim ownership over this product simply because it was produced during office hours, simply because you have probably signed an IP agreement that says if it's produced during office hours using office resources, it belongs to the company. Now, what happens if it is produced during working hours but not using the company's not at the company's premises, not using the company's resources, right? So you may need to relook your IP agreements as well. This was something that was informed to me, and I think that we're even carrying out in our firm, is exploring the latest IT softwares, the latest network security softwares and monitoring programs in place. Now, this would then make it a bit more difficult for employees to commit such acts of misconduct. Consider also having a security assessment, a cyber security assessment to tell you where your loopholes are. With that also, it will also be able to tell you to conduct more frequent, you can also then conduct more frequent audits. Sorry, just... Okay, now, these are just a few disciplinary procedures and things that I came across from my clients in recent weeks. Now, of course, as we know, working from home does not mean that, right? Working from home means that you carry on working from home normally, right? If your policy says that you need to investigate a misconduct within 2 weeks, you need to investigate a misconduct within 2 weeks. If your policy says you need to suspend an employee, you can only suspend for an employee for a maximum of 2 weeks. It should be limited to that also, right? Now, so in other words, working from home is not an excuse to slack off. I've seen in the recent weeks, some of my clients have proceeded to things like conventional show cause letters. Instead of being through hard copies, they have been through emails, right? Not necessary for a letter itself. And they've actually allowed the employee also to respond through emails. And when I spoke to them, they said this is so much more effective. We think we're going to do away with conventional show cause letters, right? I also heard of one that conducted a domestic inquiry through Zoom, right? And the benefits they told me was, which I agree, it's very easily recorded, number one. It's easy for you to get quorum, right? You don't have to worry about panel members. Each one of them, you just need to ask them to keep 2-3 hours aside. The process is also a lot easier, as the PO can very easily share his screen and tell you, for example, this is the evidence that I'm looking at, right? The only con that I could think of was employees being coached. But like how we have actually even handled this in civil trials, right? They have, in arbitration. International arbitration has also moved towards having e-hearings. And how they did it was very simple. Have a second camera, you link it up with a second camera, or you conduct such arbitration, which I don't think is necessary in this case, in a neutral office, right? And in this case, I think it could very well easily be managed by a second camera, right? Now, I think with that, I have nothing else to add. And I will be taking questions from anyone. Hi, is there any questions for me?
Does anybody have any questions?
Meeting. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll ask everyone a question here, right? So I've been thinking about this. Working from home, with this whole new global pandemic kicking around, talks about vaccine coming up. What do you all think? Question to all employees. Do you all think you all can force your employees? Do you all think you all can force your employees to have the COVID-19 vaccine? So for example, if an employee comes up to you and says that I'm not going to take the vaccine, can you force him? And if he doesn't listen, can you dismiss him?
You can just type in your answer in the chat box.
Right, yeah, actually that'll be a good idea. This is just something that I just want to hear from you all. I myself have read, I don't think I don't think there's a yes and no answer to it. My personal opinion is in other scenarios, you may be able to take such severe action. I don't think in this scenario you can take such severe action because you see, firstly, under OSHA, you have an obligation to make your place of work safe, right? Now, keeping it safe could be machineries, keeping it safe could be exposed wires, keeping it safe could also be something as simple as um, your table, the macroeconomics of your table, right? Now, but that also could be keeping them healthy, right? So there is an obligation under OSHA, right? But can you dismiss them? I don't think in such a scenario you can dismiss them, is because there's too much of uncertainty revolving around this vaccine. Some people have said that they have gotten. You read online and you see some people saying that they have got various different side effects from taking it. Now, then can you say at least the contract is frustrated? Because if someone doesn't want to take the vaccine, you cannot allow him onto your premises. So if you can't allow him on your premises, you may allow him to work from home. You may allow him to work from home maybe for a period of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But there may come a point where you need him to come to the premises. And if he doesn't come to the premises, then you may need to tell him that, you know what, we no longer can carry on this employment relationship because of your conduct. We think that this contract is frustrated. I think this may be similar to a scenario where, for example, someone is in prison, right? He's in prison, he cannot come to employment. He has not resigned. You should not be dismissing him. He has not done any misconduct, well, in your company at least, but he's unable to work anymore. So the contract is frustrated. Or for example, if an employee, this was a scenario when the PDPA was introduced, right? When PDPA was introduced, some employees refuse to sign such PDPA notices, right? And again, it leaves then your employer in the scenario where you have no choice. You have no choice but to deem the contract frustrated because you cannot hold any of his data. You cannot hold his name. You cannot hold his IC. You cannot hold his address. You cannot hold his health information, his religion, race. You can't hold any of these things. And if you can't hold these details, then you only have that very little choice of dismissing him. Okay, I've got a question here. Okay, you mentioned about the case in India. Okay, so what happened in that case, if I remember correctly, it was something that I read in an article. It's still ongoing in court, I think. It was a claim of sexual harassment where the employee claimed sexual harassment against the employer because he was frequently calling her at odd times. So he was frequently calling her at times like 11 p.m. at night. And the purpose of the calls were very basic things that he had requested. I think at one point he had simply requested whether a document had been sent to someone. So things that could have been very easily done by email, right? Or things that could be easily done by WhatsApp, or it didn't require you to speak to that person. So that employee felt very unsafe. She felt very unwelcome. She felt that her personal space was being violated. Now, I don't know whether that can go to the extent of sexual harassment or whether that will just stop it. It could be, but it may come or may be deemed as some sort of harassment, right? Please elaborate. Now, okay, so I think that goes to this point. Right. Again, I think the question is, could you please elaborate more about risk management and how it's best to educate, especially the superior, right? Best educating when it comes to superiors, right? So I think the change was this. Before, these superiors were very used to having face-to-face time. They were very used to calling their employees, having their employees with them 9 to 5, with no distraction. There was also very clear boundaries, right? I'm very clear boundaries that this is your working hours, this is you working. There is no, for example, personal connection. But now when you start working from home, there are some superiors, it's good also, and companies that are doing it where they have things like afternoon chats or evening teas, and questions like that will be posed. Oh, what did you do over the weekend? Oh, what I did over the weekend was I took my child to the farm in Bangsa and we saw ducks. And subsequently, once that was done, I went to my auntie's house and I was sitting down with my uncle having a few drinks. And subsequently, I brought my parents home. Now, in that entire conversation, I have disclosed, well, this is not me personally, but I've disclosed that I've got a child and I've got parents who are living with me, right? Now, if comments such as things are like, oh, I couldn't get you, I thought you must have been taking care of your child, right? If comments such as that are passed, or for example, I assume we shall not fix a lunch meeting because maybe you need to care for your parents. Sorry, just give me a second. Now, those comments, if you think about it, I don't think, well, and a superior itself may not have any ill intention when passing such comments, right? He may not, but those comments can come off to be discriminatory. So there may be a need to educate your employers, right? You may be a need to educate your superiors, informing them about how their new norms, right? You should not, yes, while you agree, while you understand there is a need to connect with your employees on a personal basis because you're not seeing them nowadays on a day-to-day basis, there is also a need for you to have some sort of boundaries, right? So comments, you should not bring back all whatever you have discussed during your personal calls back, for example, when you're having a work call. You should also not bring it up, for example, when you're having a chat group. So one of my examples which I could give you was this superior who said, this person may not be able to join us because I think he's busy taking care of his daughter, right? Now, that comment, it could be maybe as something as simple as reciting the truth. The employee could have actually told the superior that I'm unable to join this call because I'm taking care of my daughter. Or it could again come off to be very discriminatory against people who have got kids, right? And it's a challenge, right? And we know that. Can you please, okay, next question. Can you please share example of insurances that covers Sorry, I'm not too sure about this question, but I think the question here is, can you please share example of insurances that covers work from home or remote working? Okay, if the question is insurance that will cover remote working, so for example, I think you need to look at it individually. So for example, I don't think they will, I don't know, you may need to check with your insurance provider, but I don't know whether there are insurance companies that have come up with a catch-all policy. So for example, you need to look at loss of your laptops, right? If your laptops previously were being used in the office 9 to 5, the risk of you losing that the risk of your employee losing that laptop is minimal. The employee would have sat in his car, would have taken that laptop, would have sat in his car, would have driven to work, would have come upstairs to his office, would have opened that laptop 9 to 5. He would have done the same thing when he went back. Now, when the employee is working from home, yes, if he doesn't leave his house premises, the risk is much lower, right? But if he goes out, for example, if he were to work from Starbucks on a daily basis or a co-working space, or the risk of him losing that laptop now is much higher. So you must look at your insurance policies and see whether it covers such a scenario, right? Or at the very least, cover your employees for such scenarios. Same thing can apply to your handphones, various different things. Now, if you're talking about an insurance policy that has a catch-all, I'm not too sure any providers. I'm not certain of any providers that provide such catch-all policies. The other thing is, you need to look at, for example, your group accident policies. From what I understand, your group accident policies usually only cover occupational injuries. Now, occupational injuries, a conventional occupational injury is an injury that takes place in the office space. But it has been expanded in recent years in SOCSO claims to involve even claims where employees, for example, are driving to work and they suffer that injury. It has been expanded to even include that. Now, will it be expanded to include an injury that you have suffered while you were working from home? I don't know, right? You may need to check with your insurance provider and see what are the criteria that you need to at least match or or apply in these cases? Hi, Satya. I hope I answered your question. Are there any more questions for me?
If there are no more questions, we would like to thank. He's left his email if the participants would like a copy of the slides. So do drop him an email and he will get back to you on the slides. And thank you, everyone. Yes, all right. For coming. Thank you for joining us. See you soon. Thank you, Mr. Amardeep.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. Wait, just give me a sec. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess I'll be seeing you all at the IR Law Conference then as well. Thanks, everyone. I'll take leave now.